Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I am so excited to introduce you today to Nikki Dickerson. You may also know her as Sip with Nick on Instagram. Nikki is an international wine marketer turned vigneron, winemaker, or is it a winemaker? Is vigneron the same thing as winemaker? And she's also planted vines. So all of the above. She's also a writer and, if all goes well, in her words, a soon-to-be wine importer. I have no doubts. And she lives between the U.S. and Sardinia, Italy, which is what we're going to be talking about today. But more about Nikki. After a life-changing trip to France in 2018, she left the corporate PR world for wine country, chasing harvests across California, Australia, Burgundy, and beyond. Along the way, she met her husband, an Italian winemaker, and together they planted their first vineyards in Sardinia, laying the foundation for their dream winery. Now, through her blog, or Substack, as I have come to learn, Sip with Nick, she shares her wine-soaked adventures from discovering hidden gem bottles to navigating the wild world of winemaking and wine imports. Personally, I've been following Nikki and her journey for years on Instagram. I loved following her journey of planting grapes in Sardinia with her husband and always look forward to her posts sharing unique and lesser-known wine varietals. Honestly, that's like the thing that I started following her for, was like all these hidden gem, unique wines that she talked about. And then she started talking about planting vines in Sardinia. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this girl is so cool. So Nikki actually came and spoke to my Cork Crew virtual tasting club a few months back. And I knew that if she was willing, I had to get her on this podcast for the Italian mini-series. Knowledge on Sardinian wines is fairly limited around the world, so getting to hear firsthand from Nikki about the wine and the grapes grown here, grown there in Sardinia is just so special. So I'm really excited for you to get to hear this episode. Now, again, these interviews are split into 2 episodes. So you're going to be hearing part 1 of our interview today. This part will be talking about a little bit about Nikki's journey into the world of wine, how she found herself in Sardinia, and then she gives us a really nice overview of the regions of Sardinia, along with talking about the different grapes that are grown there. I should have in the show notes as well for you a map that Nikki sent that shows off the geography of Sardinia, so you can kind of follow along as long as you're not like driving or doing something else while she talks about the geography. But anyway, enough of me. Let's jump into the interview. But yay, I'm excited to talk about Sardinia with you. This is going to be very fun. But I always like to give you a chance. So kind of diving in, the first question is always like, who are you? And how did you discover your passion for wine?
I feel like who are you is always such a philosophical
I know, right?
Like, who am I? Professionally, I've been a wine marketing and public relations professional for the last 6 or so years now. Now, I would say I recently initiated vigneron with my husband, Marco. But I'm also a writer, both, freelance. I have my own blog and newsletter, which we'll talk about. But I love traveling. I love just experiencing as much of life as possible. I'm a huge fan of music and art, so just trying to live it up as much as possible while I can.
I love it. Okay, and then tell us how you fell in love with wine. How did you discover a passion for wine?
I think I was probably in my mid to late 20s. I grew up in California, in Southern California, and my parents had moved to Washington State. And my mom was not a fan of the weather there after living in sunny Southern California.
Yeah,
so
it's definitely different here, that's for sure.
Yeah. They, lucky for me, ended up getting a second home in Paso Robles in Central Coast, California. So it's not too far, obviously, from Southern California. So I started going up there for wine tastings on most weekends, increasingly so, a little bit at first. And that was kind of how I first got introduced to the world of wine. But I think what really set me off on that path and when I dove in head first was when I went to Europe and I visited the Southern Rhone Valley. And I went on a really special wine tour with this man named Mike, who, if anyone listening ever needs a tour guide in the Southern Rhone Valley, his thing is Mike's Wine Safari. He is fantastic. And he takes you, we went into wine cellars. We visited like 3 different appellations in the Southern Rhone. And then after that trip, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be living this kind of life because I realized wine really is kind of like a lifestyle almost. So
Right.
I quit my job in San Diego and moved to Paso Robles to work in a tasting room of all things and got going from there.
Wow. Well, first of all, Mike's Wine Safari, that name, I feel like I'd see it and I'd be like, really? But I appreciate the recommendation for it. So now I know
Yeah.
if it ever comes across.
I know. And also like if you see his branding, you definitely would not think it is like the high professional standard of service that you really get on the trip. But I mean, I can't recommend him enough. And
It's a diamond in the rough.
yeah, totally. And we've kept in touch since then. And that was what, 2016, 2017,
Oh,
somewhere
that's
around there.
great.
So yeah.
Oh, well, I feel like I'm going to have to reach out to Mike of Mike's Wine Safari and teach us about the Northern Rhone. It'd be fun. Okay, so you quit your job, your corporate job, and then you start working in tasting rooms in Paso Robles.
Yes.
How did you get from that to now starting a winery on
Yeah.
the island of Sardinia in like, why Sardinia, right? How did you get there?
It seems like such a leap. And it's on this, whenever I tell people, they're like, you need to write a book or something. I'm like, it just seems normal to me. So I was working in Paso at Adelaida Vineyards and Winery, which is my favorite still winery in Paso Robles. And I decided I wanted to work harvest, like work in the cellar winemaking so I could experience winemaking firsthand. And we had a really cute Italian intern that showed up to do harvest as well. And we just hit it off and fell in love. And now we're married. His name's Marco, and he is actually from Sardinia. He would not be happy if I was telling you he's Italian. Sardinians like to be called Sardinian. They're very proud of their island. And so like that was 2018 when we worked that harvest, and we went to Australia together after that because we had just met. We spent 4 months together. We were like, where can we go that we could both get a visa and work together? So we decided to do a harvest in Australia in McLaren Vale. And obviously they're on the other side they're in the Southern Hemisphere. So it was perfect. We finished harvest and started another, which was exhausting, but I guess well worth it.
Yeah, goodness. Wow. Harvest is hard enough, just one and then follow it up.
I know. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. He's like, it'll be fine. And then it was a massive custom crush facility also, we went from a 300-ton harvest at this awesome boutique winery in California to a 6,000-ton custom crush harvest that lasted forever. So it was different experiences, very much so. But anyways, long story short, we ended up getting married like a year and a half later. And then we lived in Burgundy, France together for 2 years. He got a job at Vincent Girardin in Burgundy. And then I remember like I don't know when it was, somewhere in those years when we were back visiting Sardinia, he took me to this spot that was his family's property in the village where his family is from. He said, one day I want to plant a vineyard here. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I could see that. And then a year and a half later, we were starting the process to do exactly that. And we planted our vineyards in 2020. What year are we now? 2025, 2022? No, ever since 2020, my years are all messed up.
Right? It's like, I still write 20. I mean, I think each time I write the year, I write a different year when I'm writing it down. I'm like, wait, what is it again?
I know. So yeah, so no, we're in 2025. So it was the beginning of 2023 when we actually planted our vineyards. And hopefully this year will be the first year that we're able to make wine from
Ah, that's
vines
so
that we planted.
exciting. That's so fun. I love how it like went from like, I think when I think of like one day I want to do this, I'm thinking like 20, 30 years in the past. And you guys were like, one day we're going to do this in like 2 years. We're going to make this happen.
We are very fortunate that first of all, it's his land that's been within his family for generations. So first of all, it's not like we had to buy land.
Sure.
And they also wanted to invest their time and their money with us and all of their energy. And they've been very supportive because obviously, I mean, we're in America now. Like we've been going back and forth. So they really have taken care of things while we're gone. So it's been a family effort, which is just kind of how they do things in Italy in general, I feel like. So, I mean, we're very lucky that we have this support to make that happen. And my husband's a winemaker. He studied enology. He's worked in wineries all over the world. And it's really like been his dream for a long time. And I bring like the sales marketing side. So it just kind of worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. I'm curious, too, from your side, now that you've been to Sardinia as much as you have, and obviously the inspiration was like your husband's from there. The family has land there. What is it that you love about the island that also was, or maybe was there anything else about the island that you love that inspired you to want to also be part of the winery experience?
Sardinia is such a unique place. It's very much untouched by time still. Like they live the slow life there. I guess you could put it that way, which is honestly, I think we all kind of need to go back a little bit like that because you're at family get-togethers and there's people that are like 70, 80, 90 years old and they're still like with it. You're like, okay, they must be doing something right here. So first of all, just like the slower appreciation for life, I really enjoyed. It's one of the most beautiful places I think I've ever been. I mean, like Sardinia really has the top beaches in the world. I grew up in California. You can't really go wrong when you're having gorgeous beaches in the Mediterranean, but it's also not just like a laid back beach island because they have everything. They have mountains. It even snows there sometimes in the mountains. They have cities, obviously a lot more like small, charming villages and towns. The food is amazing. It's just the quality of life, I think, is what really drew me in. And then wine wise, I remember the first time I went there, I was tasting varieties. Of course, everyone knows about Cannonau and Vermentino, but I was tasting other wines that I'd never even heard of. And they were so good. And the wines were so affordable. I'm like, how does no one know about this yet? Like, it just seemed like such a hidden gem to me.
Yes.
And I think that they honestly prefer it that way because it gets touristy in the summer and it's a lot of Europeans, especially, and now more so Americans, but people from France or, Italy spend their summers there. But outside of summer, there's not a lot. There's a lot of people there. I mean, they have a big population, but it's not overcrowded. It's not like you would, I think, imagine it to be.
Right. It's like they like the hidden part of that hidden gem.
Exactly. The hidden gem, they would like to keep it hidden.
Well, we got to talk a little bit about other amazing wine, but I did also, you talked about, like that being at the family get-togethers, there's folks who are older, and Sardinia is actually known as one of the blue zones of the world. And I feel like people are so intrigued by this idea. It's a place where people typically live longer, and especially as a place that drinks wine on the regular too. I know you mentioned like just kind of like slowing down is like a key thing you notice there. Is there anything else you notice like from visiting that like to you could kind of explain why this area is a blue zone?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been studied. So like these things are proven, but I think if you spend more than just 2 weeks, if you spent a month there, you would be able to be immersed more and you would get it too. It's just it's the way of life, the mentality. I mean, the slower living, you got to sit down for lunch every day, usually with your family or at least friends. It's the close knit communities because obviously like the towns, the villages are smaller, and you have people that have lived there their whole lives, but you're going out and you're seeing people stop in the street and, chat. It's just, you're integrated into a community. So you always have that support, whether it's with your family or friends or just, the neighbors. That is a huge thing in Sardinia, that especially coming from America, where everyone is like, eating lunch while they're working, or like, I feel like we're just so much more isolated and like rushing through everything. And they really like to stay connected and take things slower. They're also very active, like people of all ages, and not just active, like I go to the gym and I'm going running, more so in the sense, they're walking more, or they're like out in their own vineyard or taking care of their own gardens, or, just moving physically daily is a huge thing. And their diet is very actually kind of plant forward in Sardinia. Even though they're an island, you would think that they eat a lot of seafood like they do in Sicily. But Sardinia has more of a pastoral culture. So a lot of like sheep herding, a lot of, herds of cows. They eat a lot of meat in Sardinia.
Interesting. And that's like, I feel like that's kind of like considered like we should, we're not a food podcast, but I'm so curious because like, I feel like typically you think Blue Zone healthy diet is a lot of the like seafood, like you said, lighter meats and the fact that they're eating. But like you said, it's probably like, it's not processed. They're also having like a healthy amount of wine, and it's totally like a naturally made wine in the sense that there's nothing added, no chemicals, no processing. And I think that connection is like such a key part that I think
totally
tend to kind of bypass and not worry about. But I call it out because it's also cool, because I think wine creates connection as well and kind of encourages us to sit down at the table together.
Definitely. And I don't say that, like, I wouldn't say they eat meat every day. They eat meat maybe like once or twice a week. But like you said, it's that the meat is like, it's so good because it's responsibly raised. Like they're just out grazing. It's very minimal human intervention in all aspects, in the food and in the wine. And then of course, like I think the number one thing is their daily glass of Cannonau, because they really drink wine every day. And it's not that they drink in excess. It's a lot of them, or at least my in-laws, will just drink it in like a regular water glass. Just give me like at lunch, at dinner, your little glass of wine. And they've studied Cannonau and it's multiple health benefits, but the biggest one is that it has a higher concentration of, I always say it wrong, I think it's resveratrol.
Okay.
It's a polyphenol that's found in the grape skins. And it's like great for brain function, great for heart health, a bunch of other benefits, and specifically in Cannonau, which is Grenache for anyone that doesn't know. But it's Grenache that's indigenous to the island of Sardinia. They've studied it.
I was going to say, I'm sure your husband would also not love if you were just like, Cannonau is Grenache. And he's like, no, hold on.
No. 100%.
But it is helpful for those who are new to understand that. And we'll definitely get into the grapes. But yeah, I do love that idea. I'm always very careful to be like, keep in mind, wine is not healthy just on its own. It is alcohol. But if you're going to drink it, like, you might as well grab one with a little benefit.
Drink the right stuff.
No, I love it. Okay, I want to dive into a little bit about, I think for a lot of people, they might hear like, I mean, first you describing this island sounds amazing. Then be like, oh, starting a winery, that must be so dreamy and wonderful. And I have a feeling there's probably a lot of challenges that go with it. We don't have all day, so we can't list them all. But do you want to share like a couple major challenges that you went through starting the winery?
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. That is what most people say like when I've talked to people about it. And it's true. It has been dreamy, but there have been massive challenges. I think the first thing as an American going into Italy and like experiencing this is that there is so much bureaucracy in Italy. And because you're dealing with first of all, an island, but it's Italy in general, they had a lot of overplanting decades ago of vineyards, and they had to take a lot of vineyards out. So now you have to get approved for basically a quota, how many hectares, and specifically like how many vines of each variety you're going to plant. So it's very down to the detail. And anyone who's ever tried to do anything at a government office in Italy will know that you need a glass of wine before you go, because you need massive amounts of patience to deal with all of the bureaucracy and the steps to make that happen. But I mean, my husband thankfully did handle most of that since he is Italian. So they come, they survey the land, they check things afterwards to make sure that you planted what you said. So that was a challenge. We also have, which we'll probably talk about later, we have 2 vineyard sites, and one of them is up in the mountains, and it's an area that is so rocky. Like we had to use like bulldozers, tractors to take out massive stones from the vineyard. And then even after we planted, we were in there with his dad, who is almost 80 years old. And we were taking out, like you could pick them up with 1 or 2 people, but by our hands, like removing rocks, because you have to be able to work the land. So that was physically challenging. And then we also had, the last thing I'll say was we had a devastating weather the first year after we planted. And that's like the most critical year because your babies are trying to like take root in the ground. And there was unseasonable storms, like not typical at the end of summer, that were like torrential downpours. And our valley vineyard site obviously is in the valley at the base of a mountain. And there was flooding like they haven't seen in years. And about like 1/3 of our vineyard flooded and just killed those vines.
Oh my God.
We had drainage issues, which have since been resolved. So yeah, that was heartbreaking after you spent years like trying to make it happen and spending thousands and thousands of dollars, and then you just have to do it.
Yeah. And then you're just like, and it's just Mother Nature has just decided, I feel like we've made it through all the other challenges, but there's nothing I can do about what Mother Nature has decided.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of making wine, but also like you're kind of gambling. I mean, people that have like invested their lives in making wine and planting vineyards, I mean, it is up to Mother Nature every year. So, which is what makes it exciting also and unique.
Like it's what makes a wine special. I feel like that's the one thing that I love about wine, where I'm like, it's because it's like, this one's different than the one it was last year because, of but then, like you said, as a winemaker, I don't think I could ever do it. I have to like, I'm terrible without having control. And so like, to be a winemaker where like your entire like crop and your entire product relies on something that you have absolutely zero control.
100%. 100%. And it's definitely hard from like starting from scratch. Like just, it's not like we purchase vineyards. You're starting from planting the grafted vines in the ground or ungrafted, whichever. But yeah, it's been a process. It's been an adventure, but we've enjoyed all of it, even the stressful parts.
At least now you can say that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Back, don't ask me right after it happened. Okay, so before we dive into more about your winery, I want to cover a little bit of general knowledge on Sardinia for folks who are kind of like, you keep saying Sardinia, it's an island in Italy, but I know nothing else about it. Can you start with maybe like going over the geography of Sardinia and maybe describing if there are some kind of sub-regions within the island? This podcast is sponsored by Repour Wine Savers. Listen, I love wine, but that doesn't mean I want to drink a full bottle every night. You see, it's always a risk opening a bottle knowing I'll only have a glass or 2. But now I don't worry about that at all because I have Repour. These little contraptions will keep your open bottles of wine good for up to 3 months by removing oxygen from the bottle using fancy chemistry. And they're so easy to use. I simply open a bottle of wine, cork or screw cap, just like normal, and enjoy my glass or 2. Then, when I'm ready to call it a night, I rip the foil off my Repour wine saver and place it in the bottle in place of the cork or screw cap, and then stick the bottle in the fridge. Simple as that. Then, whenever I grab another glass from that bottle in the future, I just make sure to put the Repour back on as soon as I'm done pouring. It's that easy. Want to give Repour a try? Head to repour.com, REPOUR.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ for 10% off your order. That's Repour, REPOUR.com, and use code CORKANDFIZZ. No spaces in that, and the "and" is spelt out, so it's CORKANDFIZZ. Once you have Repour, you'll never have to worry about opening a bottle of wine just for one glass. I mean, heck, now you can try 2 or more wines at the same time and have your own at-home wine tasting. This podcast is sponsored by the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club. Interested in trying new wines, but not sure where to start? Or maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you love the idea of tasting wine live with me. If that's you, Come join my Cork Crew virtual wine club, and you'll get to sip wine with me twice a month while I help you find new favorite wines. The Cork Crew is not your ordinary wine club. This is a community of people who are passionate about exploring new flavors, learning about different wine styles, and having fun along the way. And the best part about this club, purchasing the wine is completely optional. Plus, all events are recorded, and you have access to the full library of recordings as a Cork Crew member, so you can always catch up if you can't make it live. Oh, and did I mention it's virtual, which means you get to do all of this from the comfort of your sofa in your PJs. No need to worry about driving in crappy traffic, finding a designated driver, or spending an arm and a leg on a taxi. Want to give it a try without the commitment? You're in luck. Right now, I'm offering a free class pass to anybody who wants to try out the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Tasting Club. With this pass, you'll be able to join a Cork Crew event of your choosing. No strings attached. I don't need your credit card. I don't need you to sign up for anything. You'll be my guest. Simply head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your class pass and be one step closer to becoming a member of the best wine tasting club around, the Cork Crew. I can't wait to see you there. Now let's get back to the show.
There are subregions. The geography is pretty complex. I don't know if it translates in English, but they kind of call it its own continent because there's so many different soil types. And I was going to send you, I didn't have time before, but I have a geological map of Sardinia and it shows all of the different soils that they have.
Oh, great. Yeah. If you want to send it, I'll send it. I'll put a link in the show notes for folks listening.
Yeah, it's truly fascinating. And I think it's what makes the wine unique because climate-wise, it's not super different other than, the south is much, much hotter than the northern part of Sardinia. Obviously, you have the maritime coastal influence, but a lot of the valleys and the mountains are what influence different regions, I would say, whether that's, blocking maritime influence or drawing it in. That it's kind of hard because there's so many different names that people probably wouldn't even understand. But yeah, there's a lot of different mountain ranges that kind of dissect different regions. So if we start like in the northwest, you have Alghero, which is like a coastal area. That is a very popular tourist destination. There you're going to have a lot of like Vermentino and Cagnulari. I think they have their own DOC. Sardinia actually has 18, I think, DOCs.
Wow,
total.
just on the island.
Yeah, and there's only one DOCG, which is Vermentino di Gallura. And Gallura is like the northeastern top corner.
Okay.
And there you have a lot of like granite. And that's why the wines there are very like fresh and elegant. Even the reds there are super like lively and kind of more finessed. And that's the only DOCG that Sardinia has. But mountains of granite. It's beautiful.
Got
it's
it.
like white rocks everywhere. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. And for just really quick, for those that are listening, I know in an earlier episode, I'll have talked about the DOC and DOCG, what that is. So it's a classification of Italian wine. And essentially, I kind of think of it as like a pyramid where like at the very top is your DOCG. These are typically like your highest quality wines. And if anything, they have the strictest rules is the way I understand it. And then just below that are the DOCs, which similarly, good quality wines, usually specific rules they have to follow, but just not considered quite the top tier that DOCG is.
100%. Exactly. And then if you go down like the coast of Sardinia on the eastern coast, you have like Barbagia is a bigger zone, which is like Marmoiata. That's kind of more inland though from the coast. You also have Dorgali in that area. I think Oliena. So those are areas that are really famous for Cannonau. And Sardinia, if you've seen like in any wine news, like Barbagia, Marmoiata especially has gotten a lot of press coverage lately. And there they have, I think, it depends on which area you're in again, but I think the main one there is decomposed granite. And then they also have a lot of basalt, I think you would say. It's like old volcanic soil.
Okay.
So really complex. And again, a lot of mountains, a lot of valleys. So you have a lot of microclimates to check out and explore. And going wine tasting there to discover Cannonau is interesting because you can kind of get the nuances of the different areas. And then going down, you have Oliastra along the coast. There are wineries there. I'm not as familiar with that zone, so I can't really tell you as much about the specific geography. The south of Sardinia is really famous for Carignano di Sulcis. So Carignan is the grape, and Sulcis is an area that has a lot of sandy soils. So if you go there and taste, it's really interesting because you'll find a lot of own rooted vines. So vines that have been planted without any American rootstock that were never touched by phylloxera. They're really great wines. Oh, I also skipped one of my favorite areas before Oleastra's Mandrolizai mountainous area. All of the wines there are blends of Cannonau, Bovale, and Monica. So those are three really good red Sardinian varieties. And what's unique there is that the grapes have to grow in the vineyard together. They're not like a separate vineyard. Yeah.
Are they like field blended then as well? Like
Exactly.
when they
They're
make
fermented
it?
together, vinified together, everything. So that's actually one of my favorite Sardinian wine regions. And then there's a bunch in the middle of Sardinia too. I'm kind of just doing the coast because it's a little bit easier. But I think one of my favorite wines in Sardinia is Vernaccia di Oristano, which is on the western central coast, right on the water. They're really famous for their seafood there. So if you want good seafood, go there. And that is the only wine in Italy that is made in an oxidative style under floor. So kind of like how sherry is made.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool.
Different taste, different style, really, really special wines. So those are kind of like the big ones. There's also Malvasia di Bosa, which is on that same western coast. There's so many. I think there's like 80 different indigenous varieties in Sardinia that they've discovered, and they're still uncovering more. Something like 60% of the vines in Sardinia they call it alberello sardo, which is the bush trained. So goblet, which means that they're not like on trellising. They're just individual vines that actually look like a little bush or tree. So they have a lot of historic vineyards there that hopefully people will keep. We've been seeing like all these young winemakers are wanting to like get rid of like that. Those vines are still producing great grapes. Like,
that's what like makes it special. Like as soon as you take it out, it just becomes like another region, and that's not
exactly.
Keep it special. Why would you? Exactly. I know it's like harder, and it's probably like you can't get as many of the grapes out, and it's all like if you want to make money, I guess I could see maybe.
I know, but I feel like as a whole, the wine industry, I know people need to make money, but also you need to keep what is like special and historic and makes your like territory stand out for, what it really has to offer. And I feel like Sardinia does a great job of doing that, but they're less so forward on like the marketing and PR side, which might not be bad. I mean, we don't have a lot of their wines in America, and the wines that we do have are a lot of the bigger mass-produced wineries that aren't necessarily the best quality, in my opinion. So hopefully we can change that.
Yeah, we'll talk about how you're going to change that. It sounds like very exciting in a little bit maybe. But I wanted to hit on, and then we talked a little bit about the grapes that come from these regions. But just for folks that are kind of listening, I think a lot of people, especially from the US and even just like North America, think of wine in terms of grapes more than they do regions, right? Versus like Italy kind of thinks of, and Sardinia would think of region-wise. So we've talked about Cannonau a little bit. Can you share a little bit more about kind of like what people should expect from this grape? And then what are the other, like if you were to think of the main grapes of Sardinia that you'd find, maybe like the top 5 or so?
Sure. Okay. So Cannonau is like a super approachable red wine. I mean, if you like Grenache, I know you'll like it, but it can be like medium to full bodied. They're honestly a lot more full bodied in Sardinia because it gets hot there. So they're pretty intense. Especially these days, you'll find them to be a little bit higher in alcohol, like usually around 14%. A lot of concentrated red fruit flavors. So like cherry, strawberry, maybe raspberry. They have, what I love about them is they have the macchia aroma, which is like the Italian word for wild shrubs and brush. Because if you go to Sardinia, you'll see that there's like juniper and the words are only coming to me in Italian, and they're not going to make sense. I was
going to say like rosemary, lavender. I know those are more Southern Rhone, maybe.
Yeah, those are more Southern Rhone. No, like a myrtle. They call it's myrto there. It's like a type of berry, but basically fragrant, the same idea. So you get that quality in the wine. It's super high acid, so really great with a lot of different foods. Maybe you'll have like a little bit of like dried orange peel or whatnot. But again, depending on where you get it from, it can be much more concentrated with a lot of like depth, a lot more richness. It can be a little bit more elegant, lighter in style. So it just depends where you're going to find it. But one thing I will say to the listeners is what you'll see on the label is Cannonau di Sardegna. That's the DOC, the region, but that covers the whole island. So it doesn't just cover one specific area. So you really need to kind of figure out where the winery is and like do a little due diligence and read about the producer to get a better understanding of what kind of style, I think.
Sure. Are some of those subregions that you mentioned, will they be labeled by that subregion? And could those also be Cannonau, or is most Cannonau labeled that Cannonau de Sardinia?
The one that comes to mind is Malvasia. That's a DOC. That's the DOC. But those will not be 100% Cannonau.
Got
They'll
it.
be like
Okay.
30%. Like Barbagia, I don't think that they have a DOC, but they have an IGT, which is like if what you were talking about, the pyramid would be at the base of the pyramid with the loosest restrictions. So if you see something that says IGT, that could also be a region, but not always.
Okay, but yeah, so it makes sense. So it looks like you're looking for Cannonau di Sardinia, but just pay attention to where, because it could be literally anywhere on the island.
Right.
Okay.
I think Vermentino is the big other huge Sardinian variety. It's a white variety. They say that the best area, according to the regulations, would be Gallura, which there are a lot of fantastic wines there. Vermentino and Sardinia, again, it depends like who produced it and where, because now we are getting a lot more styles that might have been like influenced by oak or fermented in oak or gone through batonnage. So they're a little bit more creamy rather than that like fresh style. But it really is a fantastic white wine, especially for summer. It's fresh, high acidity, a lot of citrus, like that bitter almond kind of finish. Really great. I love in Gallura, I love Agricola Sassu and La Contralta and a bunch of others. So if you want tips, just message me. Find me on Instagram and I can give you tips. What are some others? Let's see. Cagnulari is one of my other favorites. I don't know if it's like one of the most popular, but I'm going to represent it because I love to drink it. And that is mostly grown in the northwestern corner of Sardinia near Alghero, vineyards around there. And it's a inky, concentrated red that has a lot more like black fruits, like black cherry, blackberry, those sort of notes. But I love it because it has these really sweet tannins. It doesn't taste sweet. It's not like a sweet wine, but the tannins aren't aggressive. They're very, I don't know how else to describe it. Sweet tannins is what I get.
Okay.
And then you get a lot of like herbs, a little bit of maybe like minerality, very unique, but high quality, delicious. I think Monica is the other really big red in Sardinia. I don't know that you'll find a lot of it bottled on its own though. It has a high number of plantings, but it's often used as like a supporting grape for other red wines. I know like in Mandrelizai, a couple producers in that specific region, you can find it if you wanted to try it as a single.
I have tried it, but I think, I've only ever seen one bottle maybe of Monica.
Yeah.
I mean, at least over here in the US.
Right. I don't know if I could describe it very well. So, I mean, I would advise you to look that one up, but I do think it's kind of the same. I mean, it's definitely not as full bodied when it's bottled on its own. I'd say it's like a medium bodied, red fruits. It doesn't have as much of like that herbaceous macchia quality that other Italian reds might usually have. Vernaccia, I love. And it's one of the DOCs, Vernaccia di Oristano. It's the wine that's aged oxidatively, but they also, I think they pretty much, I mean, there are bottlings where it's just vinified as a white wine, but the quality is that oxidative style. It's super special. For anyone that listening that doesn't know it, the flor is a natural yeast that's found on the grape skins. And it's one of the only varieties in Italy that has that. So they don't need to add anything during fermentation. The yeast is unique because it switches from consuming oxygen and turning that into, CO2 and alcohol to make wine to then like floating up to the top once fermentation is done. And it kind of creates a barrier on the top of the wine that protects it from oxygen while it's still consuming. It's very complicated. I wrote a whole article about it. I'm not explaining it well now. So I will send you the link to that if anyone wants to read about it, because it's a super unique wine.
It's definitely one of those things that I feel like is like one of those complicated parts of wine where you're just like, you have to like learn about it 3, 4, 5 times until you're like, okay, I kind of get it now.
Yeah.
You're just like,
it's something like the mechanism. It's like, I can't, it's like aerobic to anaerobic is the, whatever switches.
Yeah.
And how it after fermentation. But we'll have to look at
we're not scientists. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine. We know wine and grapes, right? Well, I want to give you a chance too to highlight, you planted a whole vineyard. You're starting your winery. What grapes do you plan to make wine out of for your winery?
We have four grapes, I think, for the most part, that we planted. Our mountain site. So our vineyards are in the area of Gocciano, which is like central northern Sardinia. So mountains. They're not up high, they're in the mountains, but we're not like at the peaks, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The village of Anella, if you look that up, you can see on the map where the vineyards are. We planted one vineyard in the mountains, and that's where we planted a white variety that's indigenous to that area in Sardinia. It's called Arvesiniadu. So Arvesiniadu, it's very complicated. And in Sardinia, they have like all these different dialects of Sardo, so people say it differently depending on where you are. Anyways, it's a white variety that's really special. They've also found out that it's similar to Vernaccia, has the floor yeast. So
Okay.
potentially there's opportunity to do a wine like that. But it's super complex, and it's a variety that's kind of having a resurgence right now in Sardinia. So a lot of different styles happening. So it's kind of hard to describe one way. But for me, I get a lot of, citrus, hay, maybe a little bit of honeysuckle. It also, with age, kind of has that quality like Riesling, where almost like petrol aromas.
Yep. Okay.
So it's that sort of style, but it can also be very high alcohol. So you need to be careful with when you harvest and winemaking as well. And then we planted only reds in the valley site because it's much hotter there. And we planted Cannonau, Bovale, or Muristelu is what they call it in Sardinia, which is another red I should have mentioned before. It's bold, big, like a lot of potential, I think, with Bovale. And a little Monica and a little Pascale, which is another red variety in Sardinia that they use usually for blend. So we'll probably do like a Cannonau, a Bovale, single varietal wines, and then also a blend of everything. But we kind of just have to see how everything
Right. You're like, it mostly
turns
depends on
out.
what the grapes are like once we get there. You can have a plan, but who knows if that plan comes to fruition or not.
Exactly. So we'll see. Hopefully, if the growing season goes well this year, we'll have at least some grapes that we can kind of start to experiment with and get a better idea of what we want to do.
Yay, exciting. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Nikki's winery and just more about wine in general from Nikki, first go follow her on Instagram. It is at sipwithnik, N-I-K is what that's spelled like. I'll put the link in the show notes. And you can check out her Substack, which is very similar to a blog, and that is at sipwithnik.substack.com. Again, link in the show notes for you. There is a free version of the Substack, but you can also become a paid subscriber to get access to a ton of bonus content. This includes all of Nikki's food and wine guides, things like where to go wine tasting in Sardinia, ultimate guide to wine and cheese pairing, barbecue wine pairings, urban wine pairing guide, like just got it all. And you will also get access to exclusive content like pairing recipes, including some of the Blue Zone recipes from her Sardinian mother-in-law. Like, how cool is that? Off the beaten path wine finds and behind the scenes look at her starting her winery in Sardinia. As a paid subscriber, you will also get exclusive discounts on dynamic imported wines and wine club offerings through her new company, which she has a name here, but I know she's kind of debating still. So here it is New Road Selections, but I think she might be throwing out some other names on her Instagram. So go follow her there so you can learn more about that. You'll also get early access to their first releases from the winery, opportunities to help shape the winery, and first dibs on winery experiences. And I'm telling you all of this because Nikki is offering a special 30% off annual subscription to Cork and Fizz podcast listeners. So you can just go to sipwithnik.substack.com/Cork and Fizz. You can get that 30% off the annual subscription to her Substack. Highly recommend supporting Nikki. She is absolutely wonderful, and I can't wait to see all of the things that she ends up doing. Now, if you love this episode as much as I did, I'd love it if you could take a quick second, rate it, leave a review, and if you know a wine lover in your life that would enjoy it, please share it with them. In next week's episode, you'll hear part 2 of my interview with Nikki, where we talk about her incredible Substack, which I've already mentioned before, but we'll go a little bit deeper into it. Talk about her love for unique and lesser-known wine varieties, the new wine import business that she's creating. Plus, you'll discover what thing about wine, what wine myth bugs Nikki the most. Thanks again for listening. And if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. And if you're interested in exploring new wines and joining an incredible community, and when I say incredible, I'm not just like throwing that word out there. This community is like so wonderful and welcoming, and I look forward to hanging out with them every single month. We're a community of wine lovers that enjoy tasting wine every month. You should sign up for my virtual tasting club, The Cork Crew. Just head to thecorkcrew.com to learn more and use code WINE101 when signing up to get your first month free. Cheers!